The deputy's hand was already on his cuffs when he looked at me and said, "Sir, you're under arrest for trespassing on HOA property." Behind him, Tiffany Caldwell, Cedar Brook Estates HOA president, stood on my driveway like she owned the asphalt under her heels, smiling like she'd just won a game she rigged. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just reached into my back pocket and pulled out one old folded document that was about to flip her whole little kingdom upside down. "My name's Mark Dalton. I'm 52 and I live on the kind of land people forget exists until they want something from it, because my granddad bought it back in 1978, long before Cedar Brook Estates was a bunch of matching mailboxes and perfectly trimmed hedges pretending to be a community. I worked as an electrician most of my life, the kind of job where you learn fast that power isn't magic. Power is wires, and wires follow rules, and if you ignore those rules, something burns. I retired a little early because my back started filing complaints, and I figured I'd spend my days fixing up my workshop, tinkering with my truck, and enjoying the peace I earned. That was the plan. Then Tiffany moved in. You know the type: blinding white teeth, a phone that never leaves her hand, a SUV that looks like it's never met a speed bump, and a voice that somehow manages to sound like both a teacher and a threat at the same time. She didn't just join the HOA. She climbed it like a ladder, and within months she was president, acting like Cedar Brook was her personal TV show and everyone else was just background scenery. At first it was petty stuff. She reminded me my trash can needed to be hidden from street view even though my house isn't even on their street. She took photos of my old shed like she was documenting a crime scene. She told my neighbor Linda Chen that her herb garden attracted pests and that the smell of her cooking was a nuisance, which, tell me you've never been punched in the face without telling me you've never been punched in the face. I tried to ignore it because that's what reasonable adults do when they hear a small dog barking behind a fence. But Tiffany wasn't barking. She was testing the latch. The real spark came the day I installed solar panels. I'd planned it for months. Nothing crazy, just a clean setup on my roof done right, inspected, permitted, the whole deal. I'm an electrician. I don't do sloppy. The panels went up, and I was standing in my yard looking at them like a proud dad at a graduation when I heard heels clicking on gravel like an approaching storm. Tiffany marched up with a binder tucked under her arm, that HOA covenant book like it was the Bible, and she didn't even say hello. She just lifted her chin and said, "Those are not approved." I blinked at her. Approved by who? She flipped the binder open with a dramatic little snap. By the Architectural Review Committee. I actually laughed one short, dumb laugh because I thought she must be joking. "Tiffany, I'm not in your HOA." Her smile tightened. "Everyone in Cedar Brook Estates follows the rules." I pointed across the way. "My address isn't Cedar Brook. My property line isn't Cedar Brook. You can't just declare me part of your club." She stepped closer like she could physically crowd me into submission. "If you don't comply, we will fine you. We will take action." And there it was, the first time she said the quiet part out loud. Not please, not neighbor, not let's work this out, just control. 2 days later, I got a letter, official letterhead, bold fonts, legal-sounding threats telling me I owed the HOA penalties for unauthorized exterior modifications. Then another letter. Then a notice of a hearing I never agreed to attend. The funniest part? They didn't even spell my name right. The not funny part. My neighbors started acting weird. You know that look people get when they don't want to get involved? That soft, guilty avoidance in the grocery store aisle, like you're contagious. Tiffany worked the neighborhood like a politician. She told people my panels were dangerous, that they were an eyesore, that I was refusing to cooperate like I was some kind of criminal. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't care what a bunch of strangers in identical houses thought. But it still got under my skin because I'm human, and humans hate being painted as the villain in someone else's story. Then she went after my family. My nephew Tyler came by one weekend to help me move some lumber. He parked his truck in my driveway on my property, and when he came back out, there was a bright orange HOA violation sticker slapped on his windshield like a scarlet letter. He peeled it off furious, and I felt something in me shift. Not rage exactly. More like the moment a fuse stops being a fuse and starts being a problem. I walked straight down to the cluster of mailboxes. Those fancy, shared mailboxes Cedarbrook loves, sitting on a neat little patch of grass. And Tiffany was there like she'd been waiting for a confrontation. "You can't ticket someone on my driveway," I said. She didn't flinch. "You're within our jurisdiction." I stared at her. Jurisdiction? Listen to yourself. She leaned in, voice low, smug. "Do you want access restored, or do you want this to get worse?" Access. Restored. Like she controlled the air I breathed. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about panels. This wasn't about property values. This was about Tiffany needing to feel powerful, and she'd decided I was going to be her proof of concept. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the kind of stress that crawls into your chest and sets up camp. Part of me wanted to fight. Part of me wanted to sell the place, disappear, never deal with another HOA newsletter again. And the worst part, the part I hate admitting, is I started questioning myself. I actually thought, what if I'm wrong? What if there's some rule I missed? What if my granddad's old paperwork is outdated and I'm the stubborn idiot making things harder for everyone? I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and that HOA letter spread out like a threat, and I felt small, tired. Like maybe the easiest thing would be to just take the panels down, apologize, and move on. Then I remembered Linda Chen's face the day Tiffany scolded her about her garden. I remembered my nephew scraping that sticker off his windshield like he'd been branded. I remembered Tiffany saying access restored like she was a gatekeeper to my own life. And something in me snapped back into place. No, I wasn't wrong for wanting to live on my land without being bullied. So I did what I always do when someone claims authority they don't actually have. I checked the wiring. I went down to the county records office the next morning and I asked for the original plats and deeds. The clerk, Dorothy Mills, was the kind of woman who's seen every kind of drama and is immune to all of it. She slid a stack of documents across the counter and said, "Honey, you're going to want to sit down." I sat. I read. And my stomach did this slow, surprise drop. Cedarbrook Estates wasn't just near my land. Parts of it were on my land. The mailbox cluster on my parcel. The little community center they brag about, built on my parcel. The corner of the playground where kids swing and parents sip iced coffee. My parcel. My granddad had sold most of the acreage to a developer decades ago, but he'd kept specific strips and lots, strategic little pieces that he never signed away. And the developer had built anyway under an easement agreement that had an expiration date. A date, by the way, that was coming up faster than anyone in Cedarbrook realized. I didn't march back into the neighborhood yelling, "Gotcha!" I kept my mouth shut. I hired a licensed surveyor, Alan Price, and we marked the property lines properly. I installed cameras quietly, legally aimed at my boundaries. And sure enough, once the survey stakes went in, Tiffany started acting like a raccoon caught in a spotlight. Within 48 hours, my cameras caught her stepping onto my land, yanking survey flags, and this part still makes my jaw clench, spray painting over a marker like she could erase reality with a can from Home Depot. I confronted her right there by the mailboxes, holding my phone up recording. "Tiffany," I said, calm as ice, "do you know what tampering with survey markers is?" Her eyes flicked to the phone. "Stop filming me. Answer the question." She squared her shoulders, tried to go full courtroom drama. "You are harassing me." I nodded like I was listening. "Uh-huh. And you're trespassing. And you just destroyed a legal survey marker on video." Her face paled for half a second before she shoved it down and returned to her default setting, outraged. "This is HOA property." I smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Not according to the county. That's when she did what bullies always do when they feel control slipping. She escalated. Within a week, the HOA held an emergency meeting, and Tiffany stood up in front of everyone, like a queen addressing peasants, and announced they needed a special assessment. $15,000 per household, she said, to defend the community against me. Against me. Like I was a hurricane headed their way instead of a guy drinking coffee in his own kitchen. My neighbor Emily Parker, sweet, quiet, but sharp, texted me after and said I recorded the whole thing. She said some wild stuff. Tiffany also tried the classic move. She showed up at my door alone, no witnesses, with a smile that looked glued on. "Mark," she said, sugary, "let's be reasonable. The community would like to offer you $25,000 for cooperation." I didn't invite her in. I didn't even open the door fully. Cooperation. How? She held out a document. You sign over the land under the amenities. Permanent easement. Simple. I scanned it, then looked at her. Have you ever read the original development agreement? Her smile twitched. I leaned closer, voice low. Because I have. And your easement isn't permanent. It expires. Her eyes widened, just a flash. That's not true. It's true, I said. And if you keep lying to people, you're going to drag every homeowner here into a legal nightmare. Her voice went sharp. You will regret this. Then she stormed off, heels angry, dignity cracking. That's when I called my attorney, Nicole Grant, a land use lawyer who speaks fluent people who think they can bully paperwork. She looked at everything, deeds, plats, the easement terms, the maintenance obligations Cedarbrook had ignored, and she whistled softly. Mark, she said, they are standing on a time bomb. Apparently the HOA had responsibilities tied to that easement, maintenance standards, repair requirements, insurance obligations, and they'd been sloppy for years. Every violation had penalties attached. Not theoretical. Real. Big. The kind of numbers that don't just hurt, they restructure lives. So we set the stage. I picked a Saturday and sent invitations for a community BBQ on my property. Not as a party. As a spotlight. I invited the township supervisor, Supervisor Rivera. I invited Commissioner Hayes. I invited a local reporter who'd been sniffing around HOA stories like a hungry dog. And I invited the HOA board because I wanted Tiffany to show up with all her swagger. She didn't disappoint. She arrived with 2 board members, a stack of papers, and because of course she did, she called the sheriff's office. Deputy Collins rolled up, hand resting on his belt, like he'd seen too many backyard brawls. Tiffany pointed at me like she was pointing at a criminal on a wanted poster. Officer, he's trespassing on HOA land. He's holding an unauthorized gathering. He's harassing residents. Deputy Collins looked at me, then at the crowd, then back at Tiffany. Ma'am, he said carefully, whose land is this? Tiffany snapped, Cedarbrook Estates. And that's when I pulled the document from my pocket, the same one I'd shown you at the start. I walked right up to Collins and held it out. Deputy, I said, before you arrest me on my own driveway, you might want to read my deed. He took it, glanced, frowned, then looked up. This is your parcel? Yes, sir. He turned slightly, eyes scanning the area like the world had shifted under his boots. Tiffany's voice rose. That's irrelevant. The HOA has jurisdiction. Nicole stepped beside me, calm as a metronome. Deputy, the HOA has an easement, not ownership, and their easement is conditional and expiring. Also, we have video evidence of Ms. Caldwell trespassing and destroying survey markers. Emily, bless her, hit play on her phone. Tiffany's own voice from that emergency meeting talking about restoring access and making examples and forcing compliance. The crowd started murmuring. People turned their heads. Board members went stiff. Tiffany's face went tight, then red, then tight again, like she was trying to keep her skin from betraying her. Supervisor Rivera took the papers Nicole handed over and started flipping through them fast, serious. Commissioner Hayes's eyebrows lifted higher with every page. The reporter's pen moved like it was on fire. Tiffany tried one last time, voice cracking with rage. This is a private community. You can't do this to us. I looked her dead in the eye. I'm not doing anything to you, Tiffany. You did this. You built your little throne on land you didn't own. You threatened people with authority you didn't have, and you tried to have me arrested because I wouldn't bow. Deputy Collins handed my deed back to me, expression hardening. Then he looked at Tiffany. "Ma'am," he said slower now, "you called us for trespassing. But it appears Mr. Dalton is the property owner. Do you have documentation proving otherwise?" Tiffany opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Nicole stepped forward and served the HOA board a formal notice 30 days to cure specific violations, 60 days to negotiate a new agreement, or begin removal of improvements sitting on my land. Real deadlines, real consequences. Tiffany's knees actually wobbled. I saw it. The moment her power evaporated wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was the sound of someone realizing the rules they've been weaponizing also apply to them. She stood there in front of everyone, neighbors, she'd bullied officials, she'd tried to impress an officer, she'd tried to manipulate, and she finally understood she wasn't the sheriff of anything. She was just a loud woman in a nice SUV who'd been playing pretend with other people's lives. And as the crowd's whispers turned into sharp questions, "You made us pay for what you told us it was HOA land. You tried to charge us 15 grand. Tiffany's face went blank like a screen losing signal, and she backed up one step at a time until she hit her car door, trapped by her own reputation. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just watched her crumble under the weight of the truth she'd spent so long trying to bury. Paper beats power every time.